Alrighty. Book 2, Chapter 2, The Council of Elrond. The next day, Frodo woke early, feeling refreshed and well. He walked along the terraces above the loud-flowing Bruinen and watched the pale, cool sun rise above the far mountains and shine down, slanting through the thin silver mist. The dew upon the yellow leaves was glimmering. The woven nets of gossamer twinkled on every bush. Sam walked beside him, saying nothing, but sniffing the air and looking every now and again with wonder in his eyes at the great heights in the east. The snow was white upon their peaks. On a seat cut in the stone beside a turn in the path, they came upon Gandalf and Bilbo deep in talk. "Hello! Good morning," said Bilbo. "Feel ready for the great council." "I feel ready for anything," answered Frodo. "But most of all, I should like to go walking today and explore the valley. I should like to get into those pine woods up there." And he pointed away, far up the side of Rivendell, to the north. "You may have a chance later," said Gandalf, "but we cannot make any plans yet. There is much to hear and to decide today." Suddenly, as they were talking, a single clear bell rang out. "That is the warning bell for the Council of Elrond," cried Gandalf. "Come along now. Both you and Bilbo are wanted." Frodo and Bilbo followed the wizard quickly along the winding path back to the house. Behind them, uninvited and for the moment forgotten, trotted Sam. Gandalf led them to the porch where Frodo had found his friends the evening before. The light of the clear autumn morning was now glowing in the valley. The noise of bubbling waters came up from the foaming riverbed. Birds were singing, and a wholesome peace lay on the land. To Frodo, his dangerous flight and the rumors of the darkness growing in the world outside already seemed only the memories of a troubled dream. But the faces that were turned to meet them as they entered were grave. Elrond was there, and several others were seated in silence about him. Frodo saw Glorfindel and Gloin, and in a corner alone Strider was sitting, clad in his old travel-worn clothes again. Elrond drew Frodo to a seat by his side and presented him to the company, saying, "Here, my friends, is the hobbit, Frodo, son of Drogo. Few have ever come hither through greater peril, or on an errand more urgent." Then he pointed out and named those whom Frodo had not met before. There was a younger dwarf at Gloin's side, his son Gimli. Beside Glorfindel, there were several other counselors of Elrond's household, of whom Erestor was the chief, and with him Galdor, an elf from the Grey Havens who had come on an errand from Círdan the Shipwright. There was also a strange elf clad in green and brown, Legolas, a messenger from his father Thranduil, the king of the elves of northern Mirkwood. And seated a little apart was a tall man with a fair and noble face, dark-haired, gray-eyed, proud and stern of glance. He was cloaked and booted as if for a journey on horseback, and indeed, though his garments were rich and his cloak was lined with fur, they were stained from long travel. He had a collar of silver in which a single white stone was set. His locks were shorn about his shoulders. On a baldric he wore a great horn tipped with silver that was now laid across his knees. He gazed at Frodo and Bilbo with sudden wonder. "And here," said Elrond, turning to Gandalf, "is Boromir, a man from the south. He arrived in the grey morning and seeks for counsel. I have bidden him to be present, for here his questions will be answered." Not all that was spoken and debated in that council need now to be told. Much was said of events in the world outside, especially in the south, and in the wide lands east of the mountains. Of these things, Frodo had already heard many rumors, but the tale of Gloin was new to him, and when the dwarf spoke, he listened attentively. It appeared that amid the splendor of their works of hand, the hearts of the dwarfs of the Lonely Mountain were troubled. "It is now many years ago," said Gloin, "that a shadow of disquiet fell upon our people. Whence it came we did not at first perceive. Words began to be whispered in secret. It was said that we were hemmed in a narrow place, and that greater wealth and splendor would be found in a wider world. Some spoke of Moria, the mighty works of our fathers that were called in our own tongue Khazad-dûm, and they declared that now at last we had the power and the numbers to return." Gloin sighed. "Moria, Moria, wonders of the northern world. Too deep we delved there, and we woke a nameless fear. Long have its vast mansions lain empty since the children of Durin fled. But now we spoke of it again with longing, and yet with dread, for no dwarf had dared to pass the doors of Khazad-dûm for many lives of kings, save Thror only, and he perished. At last, however, Balin listened to the whispers, and he resolved to go. And though Dane did not give leave willingly, he took with him Ori and Oin and many of our folk, and they went away south. That was nigh on 30 years ago. For a while we had news, and it seemed good. Messages reporting that Moria had been entered and a great work begun there. And then there was silence, and no word has ever come from Moria since. Then, about a year ago, a messenger came to Dane, but not from Moria, from Mordor, a horseman in the night, who called Dane to his gate. The great Lord Sauron, so he said, wished for our friendship. Rings he would give for it, such as he gave of old, and he asked urgently concerning hobbits, of what kind they were, and where they dwelt. For Sauron knows, said he, that one of these was known to you on a time. And at this we were greatly troubled, and we gave no answer. And then his voice was lowered, and he would have sweetened it if he could. As a small token only of our friendship, Sauron asks this, that should you find this thief, such was his word, and get from him, willing or no, a little ring, the least of rings, that once he stole, it is but a trifle that Sauron fancies, and an earnest sign of your goodwill, find it, and the 3 rings that the dwarf sires possessed of old shall be returned to you, and the realms of Moria shall be yours forever. Find only news of the thief, whether he still lives, and where, and you shall have this great reward, and the lasting friendship of the Lord. Refuse, and things will not seem so swell. Do you refuse? And at that his breath came out like the hiss of snakes, and all who stood by shuddered. But Dane said, I say neither yea nor nay. I must consider this message and what it means under its fair cloak. Consider well, but not too long, says he. The time of my own thoughts is my own to spend, answered Dane. For the present, says he, and rode out into the darkness. Heavy have the hearts of our chieftains been since that night. We needed not the fell voice of the messenger to warn us that his words held both menace and deceit. For we knew already that the power that had re-entered Mordor had not changed, and ever it betrayed us of old. Twice the messenger has returned, and has gone unanswered. The third and last time, so he says, is soon to come, before the ending of this year. And so I have been sent by Dane to warn Bilbo that he is sought by the enemy, and to learn, if may be, why he desires this ring, the least of rings. And also we crave the advice of Elrond, for the shadow grows and draws near. We discover the messengers have also come to King Brandon Dale, and that he is afraid. and we fear that he may yield. Already war is gathering upon his eastern border. If we make no answer, the enemy may move men of his rule to assail King Brand and Dane also. You have done well to come, said Elrond. You will hear today all that you need in order to understand the purposes of the enemy. There is naught that you can do other than to resist, with hope or without it. But you do not stand alone. You will learn that your trouble is but part of the trouble of all the Western world. The ring. What shall we do with the ring? The least of rings, the trifle that Sauron fancies? That is the doom that we must deem. There is a purpose for which you are called hither. Called, I say, though I have not called you to me. Strangers, from distant lands, you have come and are here met, in this very nick of time, by chance, as it may seem, yet it is not so. Believe rather that it is so ordered that we who sit here, and none others, must now find counsel for the peril of the world. Now, therefore, things shall be openly spoken that have been hidden from all but a few until this day. And first, so that all may understand what is the peril, the tale of the ring shall be told, from the beginning even to this present. And I will begin the tale, though others shall end it. They all listened while Elrond in his clear voice spoke of Sauron and the rings of power, and their forging in the second age of the world long ago. A part of this tale was known to some there, but the full tale to none, and many eyes were turned to Elrond in fear and wonder as he told of the elven smiths of Eregion and their friendship with Moria and their eagerness for knowledge, by which Sauron ensnared them. For in that time he was not yet able to behold, and they received his aid, and they grew mighty in craft, whereas he learned all their secrets and betrayed them, and forged secretly in the mountain of fire the one ring to be their master. But Celebrimbor was aware of him, and hid the three which he had made, and there was war, and the land was laid waste, and the gate of Moria was shut. Then, through all the years that followed, he traced the ring, but since that history is elsewhere recounted, even as Elrond himself set it down in his books of lore, it is not here recalled, for it is a long tale, full of deeds great and terrible. And briefly, though Elrond spoke, the sun rode up into the sky, and the morning was past ere he ceased. Of Numenor he spoke, its glory and its fall, and of the return of the kings of men to Middle Earth out of the deeps of the sea, borne upon the wings of a storm. And then Elendil the Tall and his mighty sons Isildur and Anarion became great lords, and the northern realm they made in Arnor, and the southern realm in Gondor, above the mouths of the Anduin. But Sauron of Mordor assailed them, and they made the last alliance of elves and men, and the host of Gil-galad and Elendil was mustered in Arnor. Thereupon Elrond paused for a while, and he sighed. I remember well the splendor of their banners, he said. It recalled to me the glory of the elder days and the hosts of Beleriand. So many great princes and captains were assembled, and yet not so many or so fair as when Thangorodrim was broken, and the elves deemed that evil was ended forever. But it was not so. You remember, said Frodo, speaking his thought out loud in astonishment. But I thought, and he stammered as Elrond turned towards him. I thought that the fall of Gil-galad was a long age ago. So it was, indeed, answered Elrond gravely. But my memory reaches back even to the elder days. Irindil was my sire, who was born in Gondolin before the fall, and my mother was Elwing, the daughter of Dior, the son of Luthien of Doriath. I have seen 3 ages in the west of the world, and many defeats, and many fruitless victories. I was the herald of Gil-galad, and marched with his host. I was at the battle of Dagorland, before the Black Gate of Mordor, where we had the mastery. For the spear of Gil-galad and the sword of Elendil, Aeglos and Narsil, none could withstand. I beheld the last combat upon the slopes of Orodreen, where Gil-galad died and Elendil fell, and Narsil broke beneath him. But Sauron himself was overthrown, and Isildur cut the ring from his hand with the hilt shard of his father's sword, and took it for his own. At this, the stranger, Boromir, broke in. So that is what became of the ring, he cried. If ever such a tale was told in the south, it has been long forgotten. I have heard of the great ring, of him that we do not name, but we believed that it perished from the world in the ruin of the first realm. Isildur took it. That is tidings indeed. Alas, yes, said Elrond. Isildur took it, and it should not have been. It should have been cast then into Orodreen's fire, nigh at hand, where it was made. But few marked what Isildur did. He alone stood by his father in that last mortal contest, and by Gil-galad only Círdan stood and I. But Isildur would not listen to our counsel. This I will have as a weregild for my father and my brother, he said, and therefore, whether we would or no, he took it to treasure it. But soon he was betrayed by it to his death, and so it is named in the north Isildur's bane. Yet death maybe was better than what else might have befallen him. Only to the north did these tidings come, and only to a few. Small wonder it is that you have not heard them, Boromir. From the ruin of the Gladden Fields, where Isildur perished, 3 men only came back over the mountains after long wandering. One of these was Otar, the esquire of Isildur, who bore the shards of the sword of Elendil, and he brought them to Valandil, the heir of Isildur, who, being but a child, remained here in Rivendell. But Narsil was broken, its light extinguished, and it has not yet been forged again. Fruitless did I call the victory of the last alliance? Not wholly so, yet it did not achieve its end. Sauron was diminished, but not destroyed. His ring was lost, but not unmade. The Dark Tower was broken, but its foundations were not removed, for they were made with the power of the ring, and while it remains, they will endure. Many elves and many mighty men and many of their friends had perished in the war. Anarion was slain, and Isildur was slain, and Gil-galad and Elendil were no more. Never again shall there be any such league of elves and men, for men multiply, and the firstborn decrease, and the 2 kindreds are estranged. And ever since that day, the race of Númenor has decayed, and the span of their years has lessened. In the north, after the war and the slaughter at the Gladden Fields, the men of Westernese were diminished, and their city of Annúminas, beside Lake Evendeem, fell into ruin, and the heirs of Valandil removed and dwelt in Fornost on the high north downs, and that too is now desolate. Men call it Dead Man's Dyke, and they fear to tread there, For the folk of Arnor dwindled, and their foes devoured them, and their lordship passed, leaving only green mounds in the grassy hills. In the south, the realm of Gondor long endured, and for a while its splendor grew, recalling somewhat of the might of Numenor ere it fell. High towers those people built, and strong places, and havens from many ships, and the winged crown of the kings of men was held in awe by folk of many tongues. Their chief city was Osgiliath, the citadel of the stars, through the midst of which the river flowed. And Minas Ithil they built, the tower of the rising moon, eastward upon a shoulder of the mountain of shadow, and westward at the feet of the white mountains Minas Arnor they made, the tower of the setting sun. And there in the courts of the king grew a white tree. From the seed of that tree, which Isildur brought over the deep waters, and the seed of that tree before came from Eressa, and before that out of the uttermost west, in the day before days, when the world was young. But in the wearing of the swift years of Middle-earth, the line of Melindil, the son of Anarion, failed, and the tree withered, and the blood of the Númenóreans became mingled with that of lesser men. And then the watch upon the wall of Mordor slept, and dark things crept back into Gorgoroth. And on a time evil things came forth, and they took Minas Ithil, and they abode in it, and they made it into a place of dread. Now it is called Minas Morgul, the tower of sorcery. And then Minas Arnor was named anew Minas Tirith, the tower of the guard. And these two cities were ever at war. But Osgiliath, which lay between, was deserted, and in its ruins shadows walked. And so it has been for many lives of men. But the lords of Minas Tirith still fight on, defying our enemies, keeping the passage of the river from the Argonath to the sea. And now that part of the tale that I shall tell is drawing to a close. For in the days of Isildur the ruling ring passed out of all knowledge, and the three were released from its dominion. But now, in this latter day, they are in peril once more. For to our sorrow, the one has been found. Others shall speak of its finding, for in that I played a small part. He ceased, but at once Boromir stood up, tall and proud, before them. "Give me leave, Master Elrond," said he, "for first to say more of Gondor. For verily, from the land of Gondor I am come, and it would be well for all to know what passes there. For few, I deem, know of our deeds, and therefore guess little at their peril, if we should fail at last. Believe not that in the land of Gondor the blood of Númenor is spent, nor all its pride and dignity forgotten. By our valor the wild folk of the east are still restrained, and the terror of Morgul kept at bay. And thus alone are peace and freedom maintained in the lands behind us, bulwark of the west. But if the passages of the river should be won, what then? Yet that hour, may be, is not now far away. The nameless enemy has risen again. Smoke rises once more from Ordruin, which we call Mount Doom. The power of the Black Land grows. We are hard beset. When the enemy returned, our folk were driven from Ithilien, our fair domain east of the river, though we kept a foothold there and strength of arms. But this very year, in the days of June, sudden war came upon us out of Mordor, and we were swept away. We were outnumbered, for Mordor has allied itself with the Easterlings and the cruel Haradrim. But it was not by numbers that we were defeated. A power was there that we had not felt before. Some said that it could be seen like a great black horseman, a dark shadow under the moon. Wherever he came, a madness filled our foes, and fear fell upon our boldest, so that horse and man gave way and fled. Only a remnant of our eastern force came back, destroying the last bridge that still stood amid the ruins of Osgiliath. I was in the company that held that bridge until it was cast down. 4 only were saved by swimming: my brother, myself, and 2 others. But still, we fight on, holding all the western shores of the Anduin. And those who shelter behind us give us praise if ever they hear our name. Much praise, but little help. Only from Rohan. Now will any men ride to us when we call. In this evil hour I have come upon an errand over many dangerous leagues to Elrond. 110 days I have journeyed, all alone. But I do not seek allies in war. The might of Elrond is his wisdom, not his weapons, it is said. I come to ask for counsel and the unraveling of hard words. For on the eve of the sudden assault, a dream came to my brother in a troubled sleep, and afterwards a like dream came off to him again, and once to me. And in that dream I thought the eastern sky grew dark, and there was a growing thunder. But in the west, pale light lingered, and out of it I heard a voice, remote but clear, crying, "Seek for the sword that was broken. In Imladris it dwells. There shall be counsels taken, stronger than Morgul's spells. There shall be shown a token. The doom is near at hand, for Isildur's bane shall waken, and the halfling forth shall stand." Of these words we could understand little, and we spoke to our father Denethor, the lord of Minas Tirith, wise in the lore of Gondor. This only would he say, that Imladris was the old name amongst the elves of a far northern dale where Elrond half-elven dwelt, greatest of the lore masters. Therefore, my brother, seeing how desperate was our need, was eager to heed the dream and seek for Imladris. But since the way was full of doubt and danger, I took the journey upon myself. Loth was my father to give me leave, and long have I wandered by roads forgotten, seeking the house of Elrond, of which many had heard, but few knew where it lay. And here in the house of Elrond shall be made quite clear to you, said Aragorn, standing up. Oh, here in the house of Elrond, more shall be made clear to you, said Aragorn, standing up. And he cast his sword upon the table that stood before Elrond. The blade was in 2 pieces. Here is the sword that was broken, he said. And who are you? And what have you to do with Minas Tirith? Asked Boromir, looking in wonder at the lean face of the ranger and his weather-stained cloak. He, said Elrond, is Aragorn, the son of Arathorn, and he is descended through many fathers from Isildur, Elendil's son of Minas Ithil. He is the chief of the Dunedain of the north. Few are now left of that folk. Then it belongs to you, and not to me at all, cried Frodo in amazement, springing to his feet, as if he expected the ring to be demanded at once. It does not belong to either of us, said Aragorn, but it has been ordained that you should hold it for a while. Bring out the ring, Frodo, said Gandalf solemnly. The time has come. Hold it up, and then Boromir will understand the remainder of his riddle. There was a hush, and all turned their eyes on Frodo. He was shaken by a sudden shame and fear, and he felt a great reluctance to reveal the ring, and a loathing of its touch. He wished that he was far away. The ring gleamed and flickered as he held it up before them in his trembling hand. Behold, Isildur's bane, said Elrond. Boromir's eyes glinted as he gazed at the golden ring. The halfling, he muttered. Is then the doom of Minas Tirith come at last? But why then should we seek a broken sword? The words were not the doom of Minas Tirith, said Aragorn, but doom and great deeds are indeed at hand, for the sword that was broken is the sword of Elendil, that broke beneath him when he fell. It has been treasured by his heirs, when all other heirlooms were lost. For it was spoken of old among us that it should be made again when the ring, Isildur's bane, was found. Now you have seen the sword that you have sought. What would you ask? Do you wish for the house of Elendil to return to the land of Gondor? I was not sent to beg any boon, but to seek only the meaning of the riddle, answered Boromir proudly. Yet we are hard pressed. The sword of Elendil would be a help beyond our hope, if such a thing could indeed return out of the shadows of the past. He looked again at Aragorn, but doubt was in his eyes. Frodo felt Bilbo stir impatiently at his side. Evidently, he was annoyed on his friend's behalf, and standing up suddenly, Bilbo burst out, All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by frost. From the ashes of fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be the blade that was broken, and crownless again shall be king. Not very good, perhaps, but to the point. If you need more beyond the word of Elrond, if that was worth a journey of 110 days to hear, you had best listen to it, he said, and he sat down with a snort. I made that up myself, he whispered to Frodo, before the Dunedain, a long time ago. When he first told me about himself, I almost wished that my adventures were not over, that I could go with him when his day comes. Aragorn smiled at him, and he turned to Boromir again. For my part, I forgive your doubt, he said. Little do I resemble the figures of Elendil and Isildur which stand carved in their majesty in the halls of Denethor, but I am the heir of Isildur, not Isildur himself. I have had a hard life, and long, and the leagues that lie between here and Gondor are a small part in the count of my journeys. I have crossed many mountains and many rivers, and trodden many plains, even into the far countries of Rhûn and Harad, where the stars are strange. But my home, such as I have, is in the north. For here the heirs of Valandil have ever dwelt in long line unbroken from father to son for many generations. Our days have darkened, and we have dwindled, but ever the sword was passed to a new keeper. And this I will say to you, Boromir, ere I end. Lonely men we are, rangers of the wild, hunters, but hunters ever of the servants of the enemy. For they are found in many places, not Mordor only. If Gondor, Boromir, has been a stalwart tower, we have played another part. Many evil things there are that your strong walls and bright swords do not stay. You know little of the lands beyond your bounds. Peace and freedom, you say. The North would have known them little but for us. Fear would have destroyed them. But when dark things come from the houseless hills or creep from the sunless woods, they fly from us. What roads would any dare to tread? What safety would there be in quiet lands, or in the homes of simple men at night, if the Dunedain were asleep, or were all gone into the grave? And yet, less thanks have we than you. Travelers scowl at us. Countrymen give us scornful names. Strider, I am to one fat man who lives within a day's march of foes that would freeze his heart, or lay his little town to ruin if he were not guarded ceaselessly. Yet we would not have it otherwise. If simple folk are free from care and fear, simple they will be, and we must be secret to keep them so. That has been the task, and we must be secret to keep them so. That has been the task of my kindred, while the years have lengthened and the grass has grown. But now the world is changing once again. A new hour comes. Isildur's bane is found. Battle is at hand. The sword shall be reforged. I will come to Minas Tirith. Isildur's bane is found, you say, said Boromir. I have seen a bright ring in a halfling's hand, but Isildur perished ere this age of the world began, they say. How do the wise know that this ring is his? And how has it passed down the years until it is brought hither by so strange a messenger? That shall be told, said Elrond. But not yet, I beg, master, cried Bilbo. Already the sun is climbing to noon, and I feel the need of something to strengthen me. I had not named you, said Elrond, smiling, but I do so now. Come, tell us your tale, and if you have not yet cast your story into verse, you may tell it in plain words. The briefer, the sooner you shall be refreshed. Very well, said Bilbo. I will do as you bid, but I will now tell the true story. And if some here have heard me tell it otherwise, he looked sidelong at Gloin, I ask them to forget it and to forgive me. I only wish to claim the treasure as my very own in those days, and to be rid of the name of thief that was put upon me. But perhaps I understand things a little better now. Anyway, this is what happened. To some, there, Bilbo's tale was wholly new, and they listened with amazement, while the old hobbit, actually not at all displeased, recounted his adventure with Gollum at full length, and he did not omit a single riddle. He would have given also an account of his party and his disappearance from the Shire had it been allowed, but Elrond raised his hand. Well told, my friend, he said, but that is enough at this time. For the moment it suffices to know that the ring passed to Frodo, your heir. Let him now speak. Then, less willingly than Bilbo, Frodo told all of his dealings with the ring from the day that it had passed into his keeping. Every step of his journey from Hobbiton to the ford of Brunnen was questioned and considered, and everything that he could recall concerning the Black Riders was examined, and at last he sat down again. Not bad, Bilbo said to him. You would have made a great story of it if they hadn't kept interrupting. I tried to make a few notes, but we shall have to go over it all again, together, sometime, if I'm going to write it up. There's whole chapters of stuff before you even got here. Yes, it's made quite a long tale, answered Frodo, but the story still does not seem complete to me. I still want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf. Galdor of the Havens, who sat nearby, overheard him. You speak for me also. He turned to Elrond and said, The wise may have good reason to believe that the halfling's trove is indeed the great ring of long debate, unlikely though that may seem to those who know less. But may we not hear the proofs? And I would ask this also, what of Saruman? He is learned in the lore of the rings, and he's not among us. What is his counsel, if he knows the things that we have heard? The questions that you ask, Galdor, are bound together, said Elrond. I had not overlooked them, and they shall be answered. But these things it is the part of Gandalf to make clear, and I call upon him last, for it is the place of honor, and in all this matter he has been the chief. Some, Galdor, said Gandalf, would think the tidings of Gloin and the pursuit of Frodo proof enough that the halfling's trove is a thing of great worth to the enemy. Yet it is a ring. What then? The 9, the Nazgul keep. The 7 are taken or destroyed. At this, Gloin stirred, but he did not speak. The 3 we know of. What then is this one that he desires so much? There is indeed a wide waste of time between the river and the mountain, between the loss and the finding, but the gap in the knowledge of the wise has been filled at last, yet too slowly. For the enemy has been close behind, closer even than I feared. And well it is that not until this year, this very summer as it seems, did he learn the full truth. Some here will remember that many years ago I myself dared to pass the doors of the necromancer in Dol Guldur and secretly explored his ways, and found thus that our fears were true, and he was none other than Sauron, our enemy of old, at length taking shape and power again. Some too will remember also that Saruman dissuaded us from open deeds against him, and for long we watched. Yet at last, as his shadow grew, Saruman yielded, and the council put forth its strength and drove the evil out of Mirkwood. And that was the very year of the finding of this ring. A strange chance, if chance it was. But we were too late, as Elrond foresaw. Sauron had also been watching us, and had long prepared against our stroke, governing Mordor from afar through Minas Morgul, where his 9 servants dwelt, until all was ready. Then he gave way before us, but only feigned to flee, and soon after came to the Dark Tower and openly declared himself. Then for the last time the council met, for now we learned that he was seeking ever more eagerly for the One. We feared then that he had some news of it that we knew nothing of, but Sauron said nay, and repeated what he had said to us before, that the One would never again be found in Middle-earth. At the worst, said he, our enemy knows that we have it not, and that it is still lost. But what was lost may yet be found, he thinks. Fear not, his hope will cheat him. Have I not earnestly studied this matter? Into Anduin the Great it fell, and long ago, while Sauron slept, it has rolled down the river to the sea. There let it lie until the end. Gandalf fell silent, gazing eastward from the porch to the far peaks of the misty mountains, at whose great roots the peril of the world had lain so long hidden. He sighed. There I was at fault, he said. I was lulled by the words of Sauron the Wise. But I should have sought for the truth sooner, and our peril would now be less. We are all at fault, said Elrond. But for your vigilance, the darkness maybe would already be upon us. But say on. From the first my heart misgave me, against all reason that I knew, said Gandalf, and I desired to know how this thing came to Gollum, and how long he had possessed it. And so I set a watch for him, guessing that he would ere long come forth from his darkness to seek for his treasure. And he came, but he escaped, and he was not found. And then, alas, I let the matter rest, watching and waiting only, as we have too often done. Time passed, with many cares, until my doubts were awakened again to sudden fear. Whence came the hobbit's ring? What, if my fear was true, should be done with it? Those things I must decide. But I spoke yet of my dread to no one, knowing the peril of an untimely whisper if it went astray. In all the long wars with the Dark Tower, treason has ever been our greatest foe. That was 17 years ago. Soon I became aware that spies of many sorts, even beasts and birds, were gathered around the Shire, and my fear grew. I called for the help of the Dunedain, and their watch was doubled, and I opened my heart to Aragorn, the heir of Isildur. And I, said Aragorn, counseled that we should hunt for Gollum. Too late, though it might seem, and since it seemed fit that Isildur's heir should labor to repair Isildur's fault, I went with Gandalf on the long and hopeless search. Then Gandalf told how they had explored the whole length of the Wilderlands, even down to the Mountain of Shadow and the fences of Mordor. And there we had rumor of him, and we guess that he dwelt there long on those dark hills. But we never found him, and at last I despaired. Then, in my despair, I thought again of a test that might make the finding of Gollum unneeded. The ring itself might tell us if it were the one. The memory of words of the council came back to me, words of Saruman, half heeded at the time, and I heard them now clearly in my heart. The 9, the 7, and the 3, he said, had each their proper gem, but not the one. It was round and unadored, as if it were one of the lesser rings. But its maker set marks upon it that the skilled, maybe, could still see and read. What those marks were, he had not said. Who would now know? The maker and Saruman. But great though this lore may be, it must have a source. What hand save Sauron's ever held the thing ere it was lost? The hand of Isildur alone. And with that thought, I forsook the chase and passed swiftly to Gondor. In former days, the members of my order had been well received there, but Saruman most of all. Often he had been for long the guest of the lords of the city. Less welcome did the Lord Denethor show me than of old, and grudgingly he permitted me to search among his hoarded scrolls and books. If indeed you look only, as you say, for records of ancient days and the beginnings of the city, read on, he said. For to me, what was is less dark than what is to come, and that is my care. But unless you have more skill even than Saruman, who has studied here long, you will find naught that is not well known to me, who am master of the lore of the city. So said Denethor, and yet there lie in his hoards many records that few even of the lore masters can now read, for the scripts and the tongues have become dark to later men. And Boromir, there lies in Minas Tirith still unread, I guess, by any save Saruman and myself, since the kings failed, a scroll that Isildur made himself. For Isildur did not march straight away from the war in Mordor, as some have told the tale. Some in the north, maybe, Boromir broke in. All know in Gondor that he first went to Minas Arnor and dwelt a while with his nephew Meneldil, instructing him before he committed to him the rule of the southern kingdom. In that time he planted there the last sapling of the white tree in memory of his brother. In that time also he made a scroll, said Gandalf, and that is not remembered in Gondor, it would seem, for this scroll concerns the ring. Thus wrote Isildur therein: The great ring shall now go to be an heirloom of the northern kingdom, but records of it shall be left in Gondor, where also dwell the heirs of Elendil, lest a time come when the memory of these great matters shall grow dim. And after these words, Isildur described the ring such as he had found it. It was hot when I first took it, hot as a gled, and my hand was scorched, so that I doubt if ever again I shall be free of the pain of it. Yet, even as I write, it is cooled, and it seemeth to shrink, though it loseth neither its beauty nor its shape. Already the writing upon it, which was first as clear as red flame, fadeth, and is now only barely to be read. It is fashioned in an elven script of Eregion, and they have no letters in Mordor for such subtle work, but the language is unknown to me. I deem it to be the tongue of the Black Land, since it is foul and uncouth. What evil it saith I do not know, but I trace here a copy of it, lest it fade beyond recall. The ring misseth, maybe, the heat of Sauron's hand, which was black and yet burned like fire, and so Gilgalad was destroyed. And maybe, were the gold made hot again, the writing would be refreshed. But for my part, I will risk no hurt to this thing. Of all the works of Sauron, the only fair. It is precious to me, though I buy it with great pain. When I read these words, my quest was ended. For the traced writing was indeed, as Isildur guessed, in the tongue of Mordor and the servants of the tower, and what was said therein was already known. For in the day that Sauron first put on the one, Celebrimbor, maker of the three, was aware of him, and from afar he heard him speak the words, and so his evil purposes were revealed. At once I took my leave of Denethor, but even as I went northward, messages came to me out of Lorien that Aragorn had passed that way, and that he had found the creature called Gollum. Therefore I went first to meet him and hear his tale. Into what deadly perils he had gone alone, I dared not guess. There's little need to tell them, said Aragorn. If a man must needs walk in sight of the Black Gate, or tread the deadly flowers of Morgold Vale, then perils he will have. I, too, despaired at last, and I began my homeward journey, and then, by fortune, I came suddenly upon what I sought, the marks of soft feet beside a muddy pool. But now the trail was fresh and swift, and it led not to Mordor, but away, along the skirts of the dead marshes. I followed it, and then I had him, lurking by a stagnant mere, peering into the water as the dark evening fell. I caught him, Gollum. He was covered with green slime. He will never love me, I fear, for he bit me, and I was not gentle. Nothing more did I ever get from his mouth than the marks of his teeth. I deemed it the worst part of all my journey, the road back, watching him day and night, making him walk before me with a halter on his neck, gagged, until he was tamed by the lack of drink and food. Driving him ever towards Mirkwood, I brought him there at last and gave him to the elves, for we had agreed that this should be done. And I was glad to be rid of his company, for he stank. For my part, I hoped never to look on him again. But Gandalf came and endured long speech with him. Yes, long and weary, said Gandalf, but not without profit. For one thing, the tale was told of his loss, and it agreed with that which Bilbo has now told openly for the first time. But that mattered little, since I had already guessed it. But I learned then first that Gollum's ring came out of the great river near the Gladden fields, and I had learned also that he had possessed it long, many lives of his small kind. The power of the ring had lengthened his years far beyond their normal span, but that power only the great rings wield. And if that is not proof enough, Galdor, there is the other test that I spoke of. Upon this very ring, which you have here seen held aloft, round and unadorned, the letters that Isildur reported may still be read, if one has the strength of will to set the golden thing in the fire for a while. That I have done, and this I have read. Ash Naz Durnbaluk, Ash Naz Gimbatul, Ash Naz Thraktilkuk, Ar Burzi Mishil Krimpatul. The change in the wizard's voice was astounding. Suddenly it became menacing, powerful, harsh like stone, and a shadow seemed to pass over the sun. And the porch for a moment grew dark, and all of them trembled, and the elves covered their ears. Never before has any voice dared to utter words of that tongue in Imladris, Gandalf the Grey, said Elrond, as the shadow passed and the company breathed once more. And let us hope that none will ever speak it here again, answered Gandalf. Nonetheless, I do not ask your pardon, Master Elrond, For if that tongue is not soon to be heard in every corner of the West, then let all put doubt aside that this thing is indeed what the wise have declared, the treasure of the enemy, fraught with all of his malice, and in it lies a great part of his strength of old. Out of the black years come the words that the smiths of Erigion heard, and knew that they had been betrayed. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. Know also, my friends, that I learned more yet from Gollum. He was loath to speak with me, and his tale was unclear, but it is beyond all doubt that he went into Mordor, and there all that he knew was forced from him. Thus, the enemy knows now the one is found, and it was long in the Shire. And since his servants have pursued it almost to our door, he soon will know, already he may know, even as I speak, that we have it here. All was silent for a while, until at length Boromir spoke. He is a small thing, you say, this Gollum. Small, but great in mischief. What became of him? To what doom did you put him? He is in prison and no worse, said Aragorn. He had suffered much. There is no doubt that he was tormented, and the fear of Sauron lies black on his heart. Still, I for one am glad that he is safely kept by the watchful elves of Mirkwood. His malice is great, and it gives him strength hardly to be believed in one so lean and withered. He could work much mischief still if he were free, and I do not doubt that he was allowed to leave Mordor on some evil errand. Alas, alas! Cried Legolas. In his fair elvish face there was great distress. The tidings I was sent to bring must now be told. They are not good, but only here have I learned how evil they may seem to this company. Smeagol, who is now called Gollum, has escaped. Escaped? Cried Aragorn. Well, that is ill news indeed. We shall all rue it bitterly, I fear. How came the folk of Thranduil to fail in their trust? Not through lack of watchfulness, said Legolas, but perhaps through overkindness. And we fear that the prisoner had aid from others, and that more is known of our doings than we could wish. We guarded this creature day and night at Gandalf's bidding, much though we were wearied by the task, but Gandalf bade us hope still for his cure, and we had not the heart to keep him ever in dungeons under the earth, where he could fall back into his old black thoughts. You're less tender than me, said Gloin with a flash in his eyes, as old memories were stirred of his imprisonment in the deep places of the Elven King's halls. Now come, said Gandalf, pray do not interrupt my good Gloin. That was a regrettable misunderstanding, long set right. If all the grievances that stand between elves and dwarves are to be brought up here, we may as well abandon this council. Gloin rose and bowed. Legolas continued. In the days of fair weather we led Gollum through the woods, and there was a high tree standing far from the others, which he liked to climb. Often we would let him mount up to the highest branches until he felt the free wind. But we set a guard at the tree's foot. One day he refused to come down, and the guards had no mind to climb after him. He had learned the trick of clinging to boughs with his feet as well as with his hands. So they sat by the tree far into the night. It was that very night of summer, yet moonless and starless, that orcs came upon us unaware. We drove them off after some time, but they were many and fierce, and they came from over the mountains and were unused to the woods. When the battle was over, we found that Gollum was gone and his guards were slain or taken. It then seemed plain to us that the attack had been made for his rescue, and that he knew of it beforehand. How that was contrived, we cannot guess, but Gollum is cunning, and the spies of the enemy are many. The dark things that are driven out in the year of the dragon's fall have returned in greater numbers to Mirkwood, and the forest is again an evil place, save where our realm is maintained. We have failed to recapture Gollum. We came upon his trail among those of many orcs, and it plunged deep into the forest going south. But ere long it escaped our skill, and we dared not continue the hunt, for we were drawing nigh to Dol Guldur, and that is still a very evil place. We do not go that way. Well, well, he is gone, said Gandalf. We have no time to seek for him again. He must do what he will, but he may play a part yet that neither he nor Sauron have foreseen. And now I will answer Galdor's other questions. What of Saruman? What of his counsels to us in this need? This tale I must tell in full, for only Elrond has heard it, and that in brief. But it will bear on what we must resolve, and it is the last chapter in the tale of the ring, so far as it has yet gone. At the end of June, I was in the Shire, but a cloud of anxiety was on my mind, and I rode to the southern borders of the little land, for I had foreboding of some danger, still hidden from me, but drawing near. There messages reached me, telling me of war and defeat of Gondor, and then I heard of the Black Shadow, and a chill smote my heart. But I found nothing save a few fugitives from the south, yet it seemed to me that on them sat a fear of which they would not speak. I turned then east and north and journeyed along the Green Way, and not far from Bree I came upon a traveler sitting on a bank beside the road with his grazing horse beside him. It was Radagast the Brown, whom at one time dwelt in Rosgobble, near the borders of Mirkwood. He is one of my order, but I had not seen him for many years. Gandalf, he cried, I was seeking you, but I am a stranger in these parts, and all I knew is that you might be found in a wild region with the uncouth name of Shire. Your information is correct, I said, but do not put it that way. If you meet any of the inhabitants, you are near the borders of the Shire now. What do you want with me? It must be pressing, for you never were a traveler unless driven at great need. I have an urgent errand, he said, and my news is evil. And then he looked about him as if the hedges might have ears. Nazgul, he whispered. The Nine are abroad again. They have crossed the river secretly and are moving westward. They have taken the guise of riders in black. I knew then what I had dreaded without knowing it. The enemy must have some great need or purpose, said Radagast. But what is it that makes him look in these distant, desolate parts? I cannot guess. What do you mean? Said I. I have been told that wherever they go, the riders ask for news of a land called the Shire. The Shire, I said, but my heart sank, for even the wise might fear to withstand the Nine, and when they are gathered together under their fell chieftain, a great king and sorcerer he was of old, and now he wields a deadly fear. Who told you? And who sent you? I asked. Saruman the White, answered Radagast, and he told me to say that if you feel the need, he will help, but you must seek his aid at once, for it will be too late. And that message brought me hope, for Saruman the White is the greatest of my order. Radagast is, of course, a worthy wizard, a master of shapes and changes of hue, but he has much lore of herbs and beasts and birds are especially his friends. But Saruman has long studied the arts of the enemy himself. Thus, we have often been able to forestall him. It was by the devices of Saruman that we drove him out of Dol Guldur. It might be that he had found some weapon that would drive back the Nine. And I will go to Saruman, I said. Well, then you must go now, said Radagast, for I have wasted time looking for you, and the days are running short. I was told to find you before midsummer, and that's now here. Even if you set out from this spot, you will hardly reach him before the Nine discover the land they seek, and I, myself, shall turn back at once. And with that he mounted, and he would have ridden straight off. Stay a moment, I said. We shall need your help, and the help of all things that will give it. Send out messages to all of the beasts, and all the birds that are your friends, and tell them to bring news of anything that bears on the matter to Saruman and Gandalf. Let messages be sent to Orthanc. I will do that, he said, and he rode off as if the Nine were after him. I could not follow him then and there. I had ridden very far already that day, and I was weary as my horse, and I needed to consider matters. I stayed the night at Bree, and decided that I had no time to return to the Shire. Never did I make a greater mistake. However, I wrote a message to Frodo, and trusted to my friend the innkeeper to send it to him. And I rode away at dawn. And I came at long last to the dwelling of Saruman, which is far south in Isengard, at the end of the Misty Mountains, not far from the Gap of Rohan. And Boromir will tell you that it is a great open vale that lies between the Misty Mountains and the northernmost foothills of the arid Nimras, the white mountains of his home. But Isengard is a circle of sheer rock enclosed in a valley as with a wall, and in the midst of that valley is a tower of stone called Orthanc. It was not made by Saruman, but by the men of Numenor long ago, and it is very tall and has many secrets. Yet it looks not to be the work of craft. It cannot be reached by passing the circle of Isengard, save by passing the circle of Isengard. And in that circle there is only one gate. Late one evening I came to that gate, like a great arch in the wall of rock, and it was strongly guarded. But the keepers of the gate were on the watch for me, and told me that Saruman awaited me. And I rode under the arch, and the gate closed silently behind me. And suddenly I was afraid, though I knew no reason for it. Before I rode to the foot of Orthanc, and came to the stair of Saruman, there he met me, and led me up to his high chamber. He wore a ring on his finger. So you have come, Gandalf, he said to me gravely, but in his eyes there seemed to be a white light, as if cold laughter was in his heart. Yes, I have come, I said. I have come for your aid, Saruman the White. And that title seemed to anger him. Have you indeed, Gandalf the Grey, he scoffed, for aid? It has seldom been heard of that Gandalf the Grey sought for aid, one so cunning and so wise, wandering about the lands, concerning himself in every business, whether it belongs to him or not. I looked at him and I wondered. But if I am not deceived, said I, things are now moving which will require the union of all of our strength. That may be so, he said, but the thought is late in coming to you. How long, I wonder, have you concealed from me, the head of the council, a matter of greatest importance? What brings you now from your lurking place in the Shire? The Nine have come forth again, I answered. They have crossed the river, so Radagast said to me. Radagast the Brown, laughed Saruman, and he no longer concealed his scorn. Radagast the bird tamer, Radagast the simple, Radagast the fool. Yet he has just the wit to play the part that I sent him. For you have come, and that was all the purpose of my message. And here you will stay, Gandalf the Grey, and rest from your journeys. For I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman the Ringmaker, Saruman of many colors. And I looked then and saw that his robes, which had seemed white, were not so, but were woven of all colors, and if he moved, they shimmered and changed hue, so that the eye was bewildered. Well, I liked white better, I said. White, he sneered. It serves as a beginning. White cloth may be dyed. White pages can be overwritten. White light can be broken. In which case, it is no longer white, said I. But he that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. You need not speak to me as to one of the fools that you take for friends, said he. I have not brought you hither to be instructed by you, but to give you a choice. And he drew himself up then and began to declaim, as if he were making a speech long rehearsed. The elder days are gone, the middle days are passing, the younger days are beginning. The time of the elves is over, but our time is at hand. The world of men, which we must rule, but we must have power, power to order all things as we will, for that good which only the wise can see. And listen, Gandalf, my old friend and helper, he said, coming near and then speaking in a softer voice. I said we, for we, it may be, if you will join with me, a new power is rising. Against it, the old allies and policies will not avail us at all. There is no hope left in elves or dying Numenor. This then is one choice before you, before us. We may join with the power. It would be wise, Gandalf. There is hope that way. Its victory is at hand. There will be rich reward for those who aid it. As the power grows, its proved friends will also grow, and the wise, such as you and I, may with patience come at last to direct its course and control it. We can bide our time. We can keep our thoughts in our hearts, deploring maybe evils done by the way, but approving the high, ultimate purpose, knowledge, rule, order, all the things that we have so far striven in vain to accomplish, hindered rather than helped by our weak, idle friends. There need not be, there would not be any real change in our designs, only in our means. Saruman, I said, I have heard speeches of this kind before, but only in the mouths of emissaries sent from Mordor to deceive the ignorant. I cannot think that you brought me so far only to weary my ears. And he looked at me sidelong, and he paused a while, considering. Well, I see that this wise course does not commend itself to you, he said. Not yet. Not if some better way can be contrived. He came and he laid his long hand upon my arm. And why not? Gandalf, he whispered. Why not? The ruling ring, if we could command that, then the power would pass to us. That is in truth why I brought you here. For I have many eyes in my service, and I believe that you know where this precious thing now lies. Is it not so? Or why do the nine ask for the Shire? And what is your business there? As he said this, a lust which he could not conceal shone in his eyes. Saruman, I said, standing away from him, only one hand at a time can wield the one, and you know that well. So do not trouble to say we. But I would not give it. Nay, I would not give even news of it to you, now that I learn your mind. You were head of the council, but you have unmasked yourself at last. Well, the choices are, it seems, to submit to Sauron or to yourself. I will take neither. Have you others to offer? And he was now cold and perilous. Yes, he said, I did not expect you to show wisdom even in your own behalf, but I gave you the chance of aiding me willingly and so saving yourself much trouble and pain. The third choice is to stay here until the end. Until what end? Until you reveal to me where the one may be found. I may find means to persuade you, or until it is found in your despite, and the ruler has time to turn to lighter matters, to devise, say, a fitting reward for the hindrance and insolence of Gandalf the Grey. Well, that may not prove to be one of the lighter matters, said I. And then he laughed at me, for my words were empty, and he knew it. They took me, and they set me alone upon the pinnacle of Orthanc, in the place where Saruman was accustomed to watching the stars. There is no descent, save by a narrow stair of many thousand steps, and the valley below seems far away. I looked on it and saw that, whereas it had once been green and fair, it was now filled with pits and forges. Wolves and orcs were housed in Isengard, for Saruman was mustering a great force on his own account, in rivalry to Sauron, and not to his service. Over all of his works a dark smoke hung, and wrapped itself around the side of Orthanc, and I stood alone as on an island in the clouds, and I had no chance of escape, and my days were bitter. I was pierced with cold, and I had but little room to pace to and fro, brooding on the coming of the riders to the north. That the Nine had indeed arisen, I felt assured. Apart from the words of Saruman, which might be lies, long ere I came to Isengard, I had heard tidings by the way that could not be mistaken. Fear was ever in my heart for my friends in the Shire, but still I had some hope. I hoped that Frodo had set forth at once, as my letter had urged him, that he had reached Rivendell before the deadly pursuit began, and both my fear and my hope proved ill-founded, for my hope was founded upon a fat man in Bree, and my fear was founded on the cunning of Sauron. But fat men who sell ale have many calls to answer, and the power of Sauron is still less than fear makes it. But in the circle of Isengard, trapped and alone, it was not easy to think that the hunters before whom all have fled or fallen would falter in the Shire far away. I saw you, cried Frodo. You were walking backwards and forwards. The moon was shining in your hair. Gandalf paused, astonished, and looked at him. It was only a dream, he said to Frodo, but it suddenly came back to me. I had quite forgotten it. Oh, wrong voice. It was only a dream, said Frodo, but it suddenly came back to me. I had quite forgotten it. It was some time ago, after I left the Shire, I think. Then it was late in coming, said Gandalf, as you will see, for I was in an evil plight, and those who know me will agree that I have seldom been in such need, and do not bear such misfortune well. Gandalf the Grey, caught like a fly in a spider's treacherous web. Yet even the most subtle spiders may leave a weak thread. As I At first I feared, as Saruman no doubt intended, that Radagast had also fallen. Yet I had caught no hint of anything wrong in his voice or his eye at our meeting. If I had, I should never have gone to Isengard, or I should have gone more warily. So Saruman guessed, and he had concealed his mind and deceived his messenger. It would have been useless in any case to try and win over honest Radagast to treachery. He sought me out in good faith, and so persuaded me. And that was the undoing of Saruman's plot. For Radagast knew no reason why he should not do as I asked, and rode away towards Mirkwood where he had many friends of old. And the eagles of the mountains went far and wide, and saw many things, the gatherings of wolves, the musterings of orcs, the 9 riders going hither and thither in the land. And they heard news of the escape of Gollum, and they sent a messenger to bring the tidings to me. And so it was that when summer waned, there came a night of moon, and Gwahir, the Wind Lord, swiftest of the great eagles, came unlooked for to Orthanc, and he found me standing upon the pinnacle. And then I spoke to him, and he bore me away, before Saruman was aware. I was far from Isengard before the wolves and orcs issued from the gate to pursue me. How far can you bear me? I asked Gwahir. Many leagues, said he, but not to the ends of the earth. I was sent to bear tidings, not burdens. Then I must have a steed on land, I said, and a steed surpassingly swift, for I have never before had such need of haste. Then I will bear you to Edoras, the land of Rohan sits, where the Lord of Rohan sits in his hall, he said, for that is not very far off. And I was glad, for in the Riddermark of Rohan the Rohirrim, the horse lords, dwell, and there are no horses like those that are bred in the great vale between the misty mountains and the white. Are the men of Rohan still to be trusted, do you think? I said to Gwahir, for the treason of Saruman had shaken my faith. They pay a tribute of horses, he answered, and send many yearly to Mordor, so 'tis said, but they are not yet under the yoke. But if Saruman has become evil, as you say, then their doom cannot be long delayed. He set me down in the land of Rohan ere long, and now I have lengthened my tale overlong. The rest must be more brief. In Rohan, I found evil already at work. The lies of Saruman. The king of the land would not listen to my warnings. He bade me to take a horse and be gone. And I chose one, much to my liking, but little to his. For I took the best horse in his land, and I have never seen the like of him. Then he must be a noble beast indeed, said Gorn. It grieves me more than many tidings that might seem worse to learn that Sauron levies such a tribute. It was not so when last I was in that land. Nor is it now, I will swear, said Boromir. It's a lie that comes from the enemy. I know the men of Rohan, true and valiant, our allies, dwelling still in the lands that we gave them long ago. The shadow of Mordor lies on distant lands, answered Aragorn. Saruman has fallen under it. Rohan is beset. Who knows what you will find there if ever you return? Not this, at least, said Boromir. That they will buy their lives with horses? They love their horses next to their kin, and not without reason. For the horses of the Riddermark come from the fields of the north, far from the shadow, and their race, as that of their masters, is descended from the free days of old. True, indeed, said Gandalf, and there is among them that might have been foaled in the morning of the world. The horses of the 9 cannot vie with him. Tireless, swift as the flowing wind, Shadowfax they call him. By day his coat glistens like silver. By night it is like a shade, and he passes unseen. Light is his footfall. Never before had any man mounted him. But I took him, and I tamed him. And so speedily he bore me that I reached the Shire when Frodo was on the Barrow Downs, though I set out from Rohan only when he set out from Hobbiton. But fear grew in me as I rode, for ever as I came north I heard tidings of the riders, and though I gained on them day by day, they were ever before me. They had divided their forces, I learned. Some remained on the eastern borders, not far from the Greenway. Some invaded the Shire from the south. And I came to Hobbiton, and Frodo had gone. But I had words with old Gamgee, many words, and few to the point. He had much to say about the shortcomings of the new owners of Bag End. I can abide changes, said he. Not at I can't abide changes, said he. Not at my time of life. And least of all changes for the worst. Changes for the worst, he repeated many times. Worst is a bad word, I said to him, and I hope you do not live to see it. But amid his talk, I gathered at last that Frodo had left Hobbiton less than a week before, and that a black horseman had come to the hill the same evening, and then I rode on in fear. I came to Buckland, and I found it in an uproar, as busy as a hive of ants that had been stirred with a stick. And I came to the house at Crickhollow, and it was broken open and empty. But on the threshold there lay a cloak that had been Frodo's. And then, for a while, hope left me, and I did not wait to gather news, or else I might have been comforted. But I rode on the trail of the riders. It was hard to follow, for it went many ways, and I was at a loss. But it seemed to me that one or two had ridden towards Bree, and that way I went, the wor- for I thought of words that I might say to the innkeeper. Butterbur they call him, thought I. If this delay was his fault, I will melt all the butter in him. I will roast the old fool over a slow fire. And he expected no less. And when he saw my face, he fell down flat and began to melt on the spot. What did you do to him? Cried Frodo in alarm. He was really very kind to us, and he did all that he could. Gandalf laughed. Don't be afraid, he said. I did not bite, and I barked very little. So overjoyed was I by the news that I got out of him, when he stopped quaking, that I embraced the old fellow. How it had happened I could not then guess, but I learned that you had been in Bree the night before, and had gone off that morning with Strider. Strider, I cried, shouting for joy. Yes, sir, I'm afraid so, sir, said Butterbur, mistaking me. He got at 'em in spite of all I could do, and they took up with him. They behaved very queer all the time they were here. Wilful, you might say. Ass, fool, thrice worthy and beloved Barlaman, said I. It's the best news I've had since midsummer. It's worth a gold piece at least. May your beer be laid under an enchantment of surpassing excellence for 7 years, said I. Now I can take a night's rest, the first since I have forgotten when. And so I stayed that night, wondering much what had become of the riders. For only of two had there yet been any news in Bree, it seemed, but in the night we heard more. 5 at least came from the west, and they threw down the gates, and they passed through Bree like a howling wind, and the Bree folk are still shivering and expecting the end of the world. I got up before dawn, and I went after them. I do not know, but it seems clear to me that this is what happened. Their captain remained in secret away to the south of Bree, while 2 rode ahead through the village, and 4 more invaded the Shire. But when these were foiled in Bree and Crickhollow, they returned to their captain with tidings, and so left the road unguarded for a while, except by their spies. The captain then sent some eastward straight across the country, and he himself, with the rest, rode along the road in great wrath. I galloped to Weathertop like a gale, and I reached it before sundown on my second day from Bree. They were there before me. They drew away from me, for they felt the coming of my anger, and they dared not face it while the sun was in the sky. But they closed round at night, and I was besieged upon the hilltop, in the old ring of Amansul. I was hard put to it indeed. Such light and flame cannot have been seen on Weathertop since the war beacons of old. At sunrise, I escaped and fled towards the north. I could not hope to do more. It was impossible to find you, Frodo, in the wilderness, and it would have been folly to try with all the nine on my heels. And so I had to trust to Aragorn. But I hoped to draw some of them off, and yet reach Rivendell ahead of you, and send out help. 4 riders did indeed follow me, but they turned back after a while, and made for the ford. It seems that helped a little, for there were only 5, not 9, when your camp was attacked. I reached here at last by a long, hard road, up the Horwell, through the Etten moors, and down from the north, and it took me nearly 15 days from Weathertop, for I could not ride amongst the rocks of the Trollfells, and Shadowfax departed. I sent him back to his master. But a great friendship has grown between us, and if I have need, he will come to me when I call. But so it was that I came to Rivendell, now only 2 days before the ring, and news of its peril had already been brought here, which proved well indeed. And that, Frodo, is the end of my account. May Elrond and the others forgive the length of it, but such a thing has not happened before, that Gandalf broke trust, and did not come when promised. An account to the ring bearer of so strange an event was required, I think. Well, the tale is now told from first to last. Here we all are. Here's the ring. But we have not yet come any nearer to our purpose. What shall we do with it? And that is all I'm going to read tonight because it's already been an hour and a half.
Is the chapter done?
No.
Man, there's only one